Welcome to this explainer. Today we're zeroing in on a really specific high-value skill, how to upgrade your professional English writing so it stops sounding, well, a little robotic and starts flowing exactly like a polished native speaker. And honestly, here's the best part. We're going to do this without forcing you to memorize some massive dictionary of complicated vocabulary. So if you're writing emails, reports, or messages for work, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
So, you've probably asked yourself, why does perfectly correct English sometimes just sound kind of boring, right? It's a massive frustration for so many B2 and C1 level learners. You study the grammar, you know your tenses, you've got the passive voice down, but when you actually sit down and type out a message to your team, it just feels flat. It lacks that effortless, professional elegance. Well, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens.
Okay, Section 1. The robotic writing problem. Perfectly correct, completely isolated.
Let's look at an example. Let's say this is Kevin. Kevin's a smart professional and his grammar is literally flawless. He writes, I work in marketing, I like my job, my company is growing. But if you read it out loud, you hear it, right? It's choppy, it's robotic. He's relying on way too many short sentences. And this is a super common habit when we translate thoughts directly from our native language. It just stops the flow dead in its tracks.
Now look, this is incredibly common, particularly among Brazilian learners. Your writing is perfectly understandable, so don't stress about that. The thing is, this sentence structure sounds totally okay, but we can make it more elegant. Because the real problem here isn't your grammar. The problem is a lack of connection. Advanced writers don't necessarily use bigger words, they just connect their ideas better to match the natural flow of English.
Moving on to Section 2. The paradigm shift. Writing is like architecture.
Let's totally shift how we think about this. Writing is basically the architecture of ideas. Imagine your sentences are rooms. If you don't build linking words, the hallways and the doors between them, your ideas are just isolated rooms. Your reader is going to get completely lost trying to navigate your emails or project updates. They're essentially just walking into walls. We need to build those hallways.
And this brings us to punctuation. It's not just a set of rigid rules. Think of punctuation as the musical rhythm to your architecture. A comma is a small, gentle pause. A semicolon is a medium pause. It lets the reader take a breath without fully stopping. And a period, well, that's a full stop. When you over-rely on periods for every single thought, you completely kill the rhythm. We want to create an elegant flow, not a start and stop traffic jam.
All right, Section 3, the blueprint, 4 levels of sentences.
Let's look at the blueprint. Level 1 is the simple sentence. I work from home. Hey, simple is powerful, but we obviously can't use it for everything. Level 2 is the compound sentence. Look at this one. I was tired, but I finished the report. Notice that comma right before the word but? That acts as that rhythmic, small pause we just talked about. It elegantly bridges those two independent rooms.
So when you're using these foundational connectors, the fanboys, things like for, and, or, but, you've got to use that comma. A really typical pattern we see, especially with Brazilian learners, is either ignoring this comma entirely or just starting every single new sentence with and. That little comma pause, that is the hallway between two big rooms. It shows the reader exactly where one idea ends and a brand new one begins. Okay, level 3, complex sentences. Check this out. Because I was tired, I went to bed early. When you flip the order and put the subordinating clause first, starting the whole thing with because, you must use a comma. Doing this instantly makes your text look like it was drafted by a much more experienced writer. It's a great trick because it shows you know how to build a little anticipation before delivering your main point.
And then we build up to level 4, compound complex sentences. Honestly, this is where advanced professional writing truly lives. This is where you're seamlessly connecting multiple ideas, causes, effects, contrasts, into one beautiful flowing architectural structure.
Which brings us to Section 4, professional connections, idea relationships.
I want you to adopt a totally new mindset as a writer. Every single time you sit down to write a performance review, a project update, or even just a LinkedIn post, ask yourself, how are these ideas connected? Are you trying to show contrast? Are you showing cause and effect? Adding information? Making a concession? This changes the game, because advanced writing isn't about the words, it's about the relationships between them.
A very common trap we all fall into is starting every single contrasting sentence with the word but. It just gets so repetitive. Instead, shifting from but to however with a comma creates this really deliberate, thoughtful pause. It sounds so much more professional, and it frames that contrast much more elegantly than simply throwing a but at the start of your thought.
Let's look at cause and effect. Sales increased, the company expanded. A bit robotic, right? Now try this. Sales increased significantly, therefore the company expanded. Boom. Notice that semicolon right before therefore? That medium pause signals a super clear logical progression. It's quietly telling your manager or client A happened, which logically caused B. It just sounds incredibly polished for business English.
So here are a few more advanced relationship markers to keep in your toolkit. For adding information, instead of just repeating also in every paragraph, try elevating it with moreover. For making a concession, use although. By deliberately using these connectors in your reports, you effortlessly guide your reader. You are basically building clear, well-lit hallways for them to walk through.
Let's move to Section 5, the progression, upgrading your layout.
I love this part. Let's look at how a single thought actually evolves. The A2 version is perfectly understandable, but it's just isolated rooms. I was tired, I continued working. Then B1 adds a basic hallway, because, though again, we want to be careful not to overuse because. But to make it truly elegant, the B2 version says, although I was tired, I continued working because it was important. By using although, we create a relationship of concession. Suddenly, the sentence has rhythm.
And here's the absolute masterpiece. This is how an experienced C1 writer architects that exact same thought. Although I was exhausted, I continued working because the project was important. Consequently, we managed to meet the deadline. Look at that semicolon and the word consequently. We added a clear business result, and we connected the whole thing with flawless rhythm.
So ask yourself, which one of those sounds more professional to you? The answer is pretty obvious, right? But notice something vital here. There is literally no overly complicated vocabulary in that C1 sentence. There are no obscure dictionary words you've never heard of. It sounds like a native speaker simply because the architecture, the layout, is brilliant.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 6, the golden rule of advanced English.
If you take away just one thing today, always remember this. Professional writing is not complicated. Professional writing is organized. Advanced English isn't about trying to sound super intelligent or using the biggest words possible. It's about making your ideas incredibly easy to understand. Organization, rhythm, and clear relationships, those hallways between your ideas, that is what truly makes your English sound advanced. So I want to leave you with this provocative little question. How will you architect your next email? Seriously, the next time you sit down at your keyboard for a meeting follow-up or a project brief, don't just stack bricks. Think about the hallways. Think about the relationships. Challenge yourself to use an although, a however, or a beautifully placed semicolon. Build something elegant. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and happy writing.